Powell being probed. The Fed chair, Jay Powell, is now under criminal investigation as his term nears an end.
That's right. The federal probe spurred by massive cost overruns for the Fed's headquarters remodel, a construction site President Trump got a firsthand look back at May, and he was just not impressed with it.
Under Powell's watch, the cost of the project has ballooned, initially pegged at $1.9 billion, but estimates now put the final price tag around $2.5 billion. Just a few $100 million over budget. Powell pushing back, suggesting the probe is less about construction and more about interest rates.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
Now, the president has been consistent in his criticism of Powell since returning to office, saying the Fed chair has been too late, too slow, and too political. The last interview for the next Fed chair will take place this week at the White House. President Trump will interview BlackRock's Rick Ryder, the fourth and final interview for Powell's replacement, whose term expires in May.
Democrats, meanwhile, are crying foul, taking Powell's side with the argument that this investigation is all about pressure to cut rates.
He has pushed back on the Fed at every opportunity, trying to seize control of the Fed. And this latest is weaponizing the Department of Justice as a way to try to bring Jerome Powell to his knees. If that happens, it is bad for the American economy. It is bad for the American consumer.
But there is some irony here in this sudden come-to-Jesus moment from Elizabeth Warren, because she spent years doing exactly that, pressuring Powell to cut rates. Watch.
I urge you to move more rapidly to bring down interest rates, beginning with a meaningful rate cut next month.
So the markets today, not really batting an eye. The Dow and S&P closed at records. The Nasdaq's less than 1% from a record close. Investors shrugged off this probe as the Trump stock market rally keeps on chugging. For more on this, let's bring in Heritage Foundation Chief Economist E.J. Antoni and Fox News contributor Liz Peek. Welcome to you both. E.J., I'll start with you. Does the Powell investigation make you nervous?
No, Brian, not at all. And I don't know why it should make anybody nervous. Frankly, if Powell hasn't done anything wrong, then it shouldn't make him nervous either, right? At the end of the day here, the amount of hypocrisy is just absolutely astounding, whether it's Powell, whether it's Warren, you name it. I'm so glad you played that clip of Warren essentially demanding that he lower interest rates. Let's not forget she was also one of several members of Congress who signed an official letter to Powell under Joe Biden saying you need to cut rates, and in a big way, not just a 25 basis point cut, but a larger one. And look, Powell is neither data dependent nor politically independent. He was slow to hike rates under Biden because he was up for renomination and told us that the large 75 basis point hike was off the table. Remember that? Immediately after his nomination, or I should say his reconfirmation, what did he do? He gave us 4 of those jumbo-sized rate hikes in a row. So he clearly, time and time again, has not only been wrong, but I think it's very clear has been politically active when he clearly should not be.
But, Liz, I hear what EJ is saying, but does this political bias amount to a criminal probe here? I mean, you hear what the Fed chair says. He says that this is not about construction. It's about not lowering interest rates. Is he right?
Yeah, I think Jay Powell has been a pretty terrible Fed chair for all the reasons that EJ mentioned. He got inflation totally wrong, and yes, he's been completely political. If you go back to the cuts that he put in place just before the election and look at where interest rates were at that time, where job creation was, where the economy growth was, there was really no excuse for that whatsoever except to give a little bump to the economy and to Kamala Harris.
Should he be facing a criminal probe?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
I think this was a complete unnecessary provocation. I don't really know why President Trump or the Department of Justice went here. I'm totally opposed to it. I just think it's sort of a miscalculation. And now they're in a position where the Senate is very reluctant to confirm President Trump's new Fed chair nominee. So I think that was a mistake. I hope they back off. I just think this is a waste of effort.
EJ, real quick on this. Jay Powell does lose his chairman job in about 3.5 months. Is it wise to open up the investigation when he's out the door that quickly? I'll give you the last thought on that one.
You know, I'm not sure it is. I think Liz raises a really good point here. Again, from an economic standpoint, he's done a terrible job. From a legal standpoint, if he's done nothing wrong, he has nothing to worry about. But from a political standpoint, I'm not sure this does any favors. Now, given what his testimony was before Congress and what some Congress members have been pushing for, I'm not sure that this even came from the president. This very well may have come from other sources. So it might not have even been the president's decision at the end of the day. I don't think there's any clear evidence on that.
All right, let's move on to this one. Democrats all in on attempting to seize the affordability message ahead of this year's midterms. Senator Elizabeth Warren telling her party it's time to read the room. Listen to this.
And according to some self-described experts, Democrats lost power because we were too progressive. For a lot of powerful people, wealthy people from Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and Washington, to win, every Democrat should be proposing concrete plans for lowering costs. Zoran Mamdani came from nowhere and took down a political dynasty. How? He ran a campaign tightly focused on the cost of living with easy-to-understand platform. Free buses, freeze the rent, and deliver no-cost childcare.
So, Liz, I think what she's saying to Democrats is free your inner Mamdani.
Right.
Is that going to work?
God help us.
How about just free everything? I mean, really, look, anyone like Elizabeth Warren who talks about Democrats being the party of affordability has to answer one question. Why is it that the cost of living in every Democrat-run state, and progressively, the more progressive that state is, has the highest cost of living compared to every other place in America? There is just no question that they make it impossible to build, so costs go up for housing, impossible to generate electricity cheaply because they're so in love with renewables and other mandates that make cost of energy go through the roof. Everything they do, including tax policy, drives up costs for merchants, for people, for everybody. So it's a preposterous thing that they have grabbed this notion that they are the party of lower costs. It's not true. Mamdani ran on it, but she forgot to say he also ran against a horrible candidate that everybody didn't like. So I think this is sort of just a stupid kind of quest for Democrats.
Well, and EJ, I want to get you in here before we go as well. This debate over affordability, it only goes so far for the left if things are actually more affordable heading into the midterms. And we've seen strong GDP growth as of late, cooling inflation, all signs that the economy is heading towards a boom. So isn't there a danger in that for the left?
Oh, certainly, Lisa, absolutely. It could turn out to be a wild political miscalculation. At the end of the day, we kind of saw, essentially, I think you can look at 2025 as a year of detoxing from a 4-year economic bacchanalia, if you will, under Biden. And yes, the detox is painful, but it's the path to long-run economic growth. You know, President Trump could have hired a ton of federal bureaucrats to goose the jobs numbers like Biden did. He could have had the government spend a ton of extra money to goose the GDP numbers like Biden did. But instead, we are right-sizing government. Instead, we are putting the economy back on a long-term sustainable trajectory. And while that may have caused some painful but needed structural changes in 2025, I think this year all the dials are really lining up, and we are setting up for big economic growth numbers. 5% is possible.
All right. EJ Antoni, Liz Peek, thanks for being
guys.
with us tonight. Good to
Thanks
see
for
you.
having us.